Some lives are beautiful on the outside. Born into wealth, surrounded by luxury and everyone's admiration, what more could anyone want? Amelia Stanton is that person. He lives in a world of sparkling chandeliers, endless parties, and billions of dollars. But as glamorous as his life was, he wasn't as successful as people thought. Beneath her outward appearance, Amelia feels lost. Trapped, even. No one can see that behind her fashion design and social values lies a young woman who wants something more. Amelia is the only daughter of Richard Stanton, one of the country's leading art tycoons. Her father built his empire from the ground up, creating a company worth billions of dollars. He is a man of discipline, ambition, and strict morals, values he expects Amelia to uphold without question. Amelia grieves the legacy she inherited from her childhood. Elite schools, private tutors, and lectures with the support of wealthy patrons were part of her upbringing. To the outside world, this is the nature of law enforcement. But to Amelia, it is a gilded cage. His family's ambitions are shattered. They have planned her entire life, what job she will have, what neighborhood she will move to, even the man she will marry. Love is not the most important thing, a relationship on paper is the most important thing. For the Stantons, everything is about wealth, connections, and fame. And Amelia? He was a pawn in their court, a wall designed to secure the family dynasty. One day at a grand New York City party, Amelia discovered everything her family valued. Guests sipped champagne from crystal flutes, laughing as strings played softly against the wall. Richard Stanton moved through the crowd, shaking hands with politicians and leaders. Amelia, standing up, her smile narrowed as she nodded graciously from a corner with a message she deserved, one that her father approved of. She was expected to marry someone who would strengthen the Stanton name, perhaps a wealthy heir or a rising star in the industry. Someone who fits into their world perfectly. But nothing was right for Amelia. They didn't want to live a life governed by contracts and cold calculations. He longed for things to be real, something he had rarely seen in his life. Amelia's mind wandered as she listened to the man in front of her talk about his family's finances. He wondered if there was a place where life was simpler and where people weren't tied to their bank accounts. Hundreds of miles away in a small rural village, Ethan Carter has a very different life from Amelia's. Ethan is neither rich nor famous. He doesn't go to parties or socialize with the elite. Instead, he wakes up before sunrise every morning and enters a world of soil, seeds, and hard work. Ethan is a farmer, and while his life is not glamorous, it is very hard. He found joy in the little things, the smell of fresh earth after a rain, the satisfaction of a day's work, and the connection to his community. Ethan's world is peaceful and modest and rich in money. His neighbors respected him not for what he had, but for who he was. He was a man who would drop everything to help someone in need, whether it was fixing a broken fence or bringing fresh produce to a family in need. Ethan's values are deep-rooted: honesty, kindness, and a love of the simple life. He didn't feel the need to prove himself to anyone, which gave him a freedom that Amelia had only dreamed of. Ethan had been alone his whole life. He didn't mind being alone. In fact, the farm took up most of his time and energy. But even he didn't deny that sometimes, late at night, when the stars lit up the sky, he wondered what it would be like to share his life with someone else. There are people who understand him, and there are those who see the beauty of the life he has created. He never thought that someone could come from a land so far away from him. Whatever their fates, their paths unexpectedly crossed. Amelia's high life and Ethan's simple world will soon collide, and the consequences will shake their lives. But love has a way of breaking down barriers and showing people what really matters. Amelia has always been interested in the countryside. At weekends, the city life is too much for him. He goes to quiet towns and open country, to get fresh air. He never told his family where he was going, they don't understand. To them, living in a village is disgusting and far from the luxurious life they cherish. But for Amelia, this was just a sight. On one of her trips, Amelia wanders into a farmer's market. The air is filled with the scent of flowers and baked goods, a stark contrast to the pristine surroundings of the upper world. She wanders through the stalls, marveling at the handicrafts and baskets full of colorful produce. It is here, in this humble market, that she first meets Ethan. It is a brief encounter at first. Amelia happened upon him while admiring the fresh strawberries. He begged quickly, but Ethan just smiled and gave him a towel to clean the coffee that spilled on him. It was an easy job, but he got it. He didn't know her and didn't know or care about her last name. To him, he was just a man in the market, which was refreshing. Amelia never forgot that brief interaction after she returned to the city. She couldn't explain why, but something about Ethan had drawn her in. Maybe it was his friendly smile, or the way he carried himself, a confidence that wasn't a big deal. In any case, he would be back at the market in the coming weeks. This time, she felt confident enough to start a conversation. They talked about farming, the weather, and the challenges of rural life. Ethan spoke honestly about something different about Amelia. He didn't try to impress her or win her heart. He was just himself, and that was enough. As time went on, these conversations grew longer. Amelia begins to visit the farm, helping with chores and learning about a life so different from her own. With each visit, she grows stronger. But their relationship is not without its challenges. Word spreads quickly through the town, and soon word reaches Amelia's family that the town's wealthy daughter is visiting the farm. When her parents find out, their response is swift and brutal. For them, Ethan is not a mistake, but a threat to everything they fought for. The farmers are not part of their world, and they know that Amelia should know. Yet, for the first time in her life, Amelia felt like she was worth fighting for. Ethan wasn't perfect, but he was right. He represented the life he had always dreamed of, full of love, purpose, and honesty. Although the road ahead was not smooth, Amelia decided to follow her heart. Life has a way of bringing people together when they least expect it. For Amelia and Ethan, their connection begins with the little, mundane things. At first, it was just casual conversation when Amelia visited the farm. While Ethan worked, she would sit on the hedge and ask him questions about his life. Although Ethan was hesitant at first, he eventually began to open up. He tells the story of growing up in a rural area, describing how farming has been a part of his family for generations and the pride he feels in continuing that tradition. Amelia listened carefully, and her heart was touched by his words. Ethan was behind her, curious about Amelia's world. He talked about his life in the city, the pressure of meeting his family's expectations, and feeling lonely despite being surrounded by people. He admitted that he had everything money could buy, but he still felt like something was missing. For the first time, Amelia felt she could express her feelings honestly without worrying about being judged. As the weeks passed, their feelings grew stronger. Amelia found that what she looked forward to most was visiting the farm. She liked that Ethan treated her like a normal person and not the daughter of a billionaire. He didn't try to influence him or gain anything for him. To him, she was just Amelia. Ethan also begins to see Amelia in a different light. At first, he thought she was just a curious city girl looking for a break from her busy life. But the more time they spent together, the more he saw the real him. He wasn't just wealthy, he was humble, thoughtful, and eager to understand his world. He doesn't mind getting his hands dirty, whether he's helping to feed the chickens or planting seeds in the fields. He laughed whenever he made a mistake, like the time he accidentally let a goat out of the barn and had to herd it back into the yard. To Ethan, Amelia wasn't on the farm, she was inside the farm. 44 One evening, as the sun was setting and the fields were glowing golden, Amelia and Ethan sat on the porch talking. Dream. Amelia shared how she had always wanted to do something meaningful with her life but felt the pressure of her family's expectations. Ethan listened carefully and said, "You don't have to be what they want you to be. You can choose your own path." 44 These words kept lingering in Amelia's mind. And it feels good deepened her feelings for Ethan. As their relationship grew stronger, challenges came along. As they say, small towns have big ears. Soon, word of Amelia's visit to the farm spread throughout the village. People began to talk, wondering why a wealthy countrywoman would spend so much time with a humble farmer. The conversation eventually reached the Stanton family, and when they found out, their reaction was swift. Amelia's father, Richard Stanton, was furious. It was unthinkable to him that his daughter would date a farmer. She thought Ethan was only a distraction from giving Amelia the life she deserved. One weekend when Amelia returned to town, she encountered a confrontation she would never forget. Richard stood in his spacious office, his voice cold and sharp as he spoke. "Amelia, I've worked my whole life for this family's reputation and fortune. Do you think I'd let you throw it all away for a farmer?" Despite her concern, Amelia stood up. "Dad, Ethan is more than a farmer. He's hardworking, kind, and loyal. That's everything I like about a man." But Richard doesn't believe him. In his eyes, the world is black and white, success is measured by wealth, and relationships are meant to strengthen, not weaken. Amelia warns that she must end her relationship with Ethan, or she will have to face the consequences. For the Stantons, family loyalty is everything, and crossing the line means cutting off their wealth and influence. Amelia's heart is broken. He knew his family was close, but he hadn't expected them to be here. He had been away from his friends for so many days, living the life he knew and the life he loved. He knew in his heart that this choice wasn't going to be easy. When he returned to the farm, Ethan immediately knew something was wrong. Amelia tried to hide her feelings, but Ethan's patient gentleness forced her to express them. He told her everything, his family's reaction, his threats, and the difficult decision he faced. Ethan listened slowly, thoughtfully. When he was done, he sighed, "Amelia, I don't want to be the reason your family loses you. You've worked so hard to get to where you are today, and I can't ask you to give me everything." But Amelia shook her head, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Ethan, this isn't just about you, it's about me too. For the first time, I feel like I've found something real, something worth fighting for. I don't want to be me, living the life that others want me to." Ethan felt moved by her words, but he also felt the intensity of the situation. He knew how Amelia's family felt about him, even if they didn't always tell him. He didn't want to leave her and his parents, but he couldn't deny the feelings they had. The next few days were filled with uncertainty. Amelia and Ethan still spent time together, but the shadow of their family's discontent hung over them. Amelia tried to convince her parents to let her see Ethan, to see the man she had grown to love, but they refused. For them, it's not enough. Despite the challenges, Amelia and Ethan's bond only grows stronger. They find peace and unity, knowing that the road ahead will not be easy, but they believe that their love is worth the fight. And although they don't know it yet, their decision to stay together will lead to events that will change their lives, and the Stanton family, forever. Amelia makes a decision. He no longer allows his father or his family to dictate his life. It is not easy for her to turn her back on everything she knows, her home, the acceptance of her family, and the world she grew up in. But he gradually learns that love is worth the sacrifice. Ethan is not just a sad man, he represents the life he wants. Life is honest, simple, and purposeful. One morning, Amelia arrived at the field with a determined look on her face. Ethan saw it immediately. Putting down the bucket he was carrying, he walked over to her, worried about his condition. "Amelia, what happened?" He took a deep breath before answering. "Ethan, I've made up my mind. I want to be with you. No matter my money." Ethan was silent, but a smile was still on his face. He kept to his own thoughts, feeling like he was putting too much pressure on Amelia. He knew what he was letting her go with, and some part of him felt it wasn't worth the sacrifice. "Amelia, you sure? This isn't just for us. You're going around the world. I don't want you to regret this." He came closer, his eyes filled with determination. "I won't regret it. I've never understood anything in my life. I don't want to expect anything else. I want to live for me. And I want to be with you." Ethan felt a car flying around him. He didn't expect someone like Amelia to choose him, a simple farmer with no wealth, no power, and nothing to offer but his love and loyalty. But when he looked at them, he would realize that they were real. She was good for fighting. That same week, they decided to get married. It wasn't a big ceremony with hundreds of guests and fancy decorations. Instead, it was a quiet gathering on the farm, attended by a few close friends and neighbors. Amelia wore a simple white dress, and Ethan wore his favorite shirt. As they lay under the open sky, surrounded by the fields Ethan had worked hard to cultivate, they felt very peaceful. This wasn't the kind of wedding Amelia's family had planned for her, but it was perfect in its simplicity. But as Amelia and Ethan celebrated their love, the news shocked her family. When Richard Stanton found out about the marriage, he was furious. For him, this wasn't just a personal decision, it was a betrayal. He saw Amelia's marriage as a violation of everything he had ever done legally. She couldn't understand why she would give up her life for someone who had nothing to give. Richard wasn't the only one who was upset. Amelia's mother, Margaret, was heartbroken. She loved her daughter dearly, but she couldn't understand why Amelia chose a life of hardship over comfort. Margaret had always thought that Amelia's happiness depended on security and success, and she was afraid that her daughter would be disappointed if she made a mistake. The Stantons immediately divorced Amelia. They froze her bank accounts, removed her inheritance from the family, and even spread word among the wealthy to let them know that Amelia was no longer a part of their world. To them, it is a constitutional principle. They believed that by severing their relationship, they could force Amelia to realize the error of her ways. 44, but Amelia was disappointed. He knows the road ahead won't be easy, but he's ready for the challenge. He is not afraid to work hard or start over. What matters most to her is the life she has built with Ethan, a life filled with love and purpose. Over the next few weeks, Amelia threw herself into her new role on the farm. Whether it was milking cows, harvesting or repairing broken equipment, he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. At first, he struggled. Farming was hard work and not very much like his life. But with Ethan's patient guidance and encouragement, he gradually found his footing. 4,444 Their days are long and their nights are spent planning for the future. Amelia uses her business acumen to help Ethan improve the farm's operations. He proposed new ways to increase yields, provided research funding for small farmers, and even came up with an idea for a line of environmentally friendly products that could be sold in local markets. Ethan was amazed by her determination and skill. They are a team, a partnership based on mutual respect and love. But not everyone in the community is supportive. Some people wonder why Amelia would choose to marry Ethan. They whispered to him that he was a fool for leaving his comfortable life behind. Some doubted his intentions and wondered if he would still be around after farm life was over. Amelia heard the whispers, but she didn't let them get to her. She decides to show that her love for Ethan is real and that she is committed to their life together. Meanwhile, Richard Stanton was watching from a distance. Despite his anger and despair, he couldn't help but grab his daughter. He was surprised to find that he was doing well on the farm, working hard to make ends meet. This was a side of Amelia he had never seen before, a side that made him wonder if he had underestimated her. One night, when Richard was alone in his room, he found himself looking at an old photo of Amelia as a child. In the photo, he was smiling and his eyes were full of joy and surprise. She reminds one of the little girl she was before she had this weight on her shoulders. For the first time, Richard began to wonder if he was wrong. Maybe Amelia didn't need the life he had planned for her. Maybe he found something more valuable. Back on the farm, life continues in unexpected ways. Amelia and Ethan face their own challenges, bad weather, financial problems, and sometimes personality clashes, but they find a way to overcome them. Their love is their foundation and the strength to keep going no matter what. One evening, as they sit together, watching the sun set over the fields, Amelia turns to Ethan and says, "I never thought I'd be this happy. Thank you for believing in me." Ethan smiles and shakes his hand. Take his hand. "I thank you. You have changed my life in ways I never imagined." But their journey is far from over. The challenges they have faced so far are just the beginning. Without realizing it, they support each other. Other decisions. Soon there is an unexpected reconciliation with Amelia's family and a change that none of them could have predicted. Amelia and Ethan's life on the farm is not easy, but it is very good. Every day brought new challenges, but also new opportunities to grow, individually and as a couple. Amelia, once accustomed to a life of luxury, had now accepted the simplicity of farming. In the morning, the world quieted down, and the first rays of sunlight shone on the fields, and she felt a strange joy. Despite the physical fatigue, the work brought a feeling of joy she had never experienced before. Etana often looked at Amelia with deep admiration. He saw how hard she worked at each task, how determined she was to do her part. She didn't shy away from the hard and the stupid. Whether it was fixing a broken fence or helping a cow struggling to give birth, Amelia was so passionate and compassionate. Ethan couldn't contain his pride in her. But Amelia wasn't the only one who had changed. Ethan also finds growth in unexpected ways. Having someone like Amelia around him, someone who believed in him and his dreams, gives him the courage to think bigger. For years he was content to simply run his farm. But now, with Amelia's encouragement, he's starting to dream of expanding his business, turning his farm into something more than just a living. Together, they brainstormed ways to make the farm more profitable. Amelia used her business acumen to research new trends and markets. They began experimenting with organic farming methods and selling their produce at local markets under a new brand called Carter's Harvest. The response was overwhelming. Customers loved the fresh, high-quality produce, and the story behind it. A wealthy woman who traded in the city for the farm has greatly enhanced her brand. Despite the progress, the road hasn't been smooth. Sometimes I'm short on money and can't spend it. Unexpected expenses, like repairing old equipment or failing crops, often made their journey difficult. But despite everything, they relied on each other for support. When things get tough, Amelia reminds Ethan of their journey, and Ethan assures her that they are in this together. At the time, Amelia's family was in serious trouble. Richard Stanton seemed to want to leave Amelia, but he couldn't avoid the problem. He often wondered about her. How is she? Is she happy or sad about her decision? He never really admitted it, but he missed her at home. Margaret also suffered from a strange condition. She wanted to get closer to her daughter, but she was afraid of what Richard would do. She had always been the peacemaker in the family, and she was terrified of rebelling against her husband. Richard's pride prevented him from accepting, but the news of Amelia's progress on the farm surprised him. He had hoped she wouldn't and would turn to her family for support. But she had a life. The success of Carter's Harvest reached some of her business partners, who praised the message and the quality of the brand. This deepened his inner struggle. He couldn't understand how Amelia could do something so amazing without the resources he believed were essential. One day, Richard unexpectedly visits an old friend, Thomas Grayson, a prominent figure in the agricultural industry. Thomas, unaware of the Stanton family feud, simply cited the success of a small organic farm he worked with. He said, "It's run by a young couple, the woman's name is Amelia. It looks like she's your daughter, right?" Richard was surprised. He had no idea how effective Amelia's efforts had been. Thomas tried to hide his emotions, but he could see the surprise, and perhaps a touch of pride, in his old friend's eyes. "She did well," Thomas continued. "You should be pleased." Richard shook his head curtly, refusing to say more. But that night, as he sat alone in his study, he kept thinking about what Thomas had said. At first, he began to think that he had gained too much weight. Maybe Amelia's success was no coincidence. Maybe she had found her way. Life on the farm continues to evolve in unexpected ways. With the arrival of a harsh winter, Amelia and Ethan face new challenges. The cold weather has made farming even more difficult and their resources have been depleted. Instead of letting their problems wear them down, however, they take the time to bond. They spend the evening by the fire, talking about their dreams and plans for the future. In her quiet moments, Amelia often thinks of her family. He missed them. He missed his mother's companionship, his father's rare but real warmth, and even the life he knew he had abandoned. He thought they missed him, too. One night, as they sat together over tea, Amelia turned to Ethan and said, "Are you thinking about their future?" "I mean my family." Ethan put down his cup and thought for a moment before answering. I don't know, he admitted honestly. But I do know this, you taught them something they never expected. You proved to them that you were stronger than they thought and that you could stand on your own 2 feet. See, before they change. Her family is not yet ready to accept her choice, but she hopes that one day they will. The first sign of change came unexpectedly. Unable to bear the silence, Margaret decided to help her daughter. She wrote a letter, choosing her words carefully so as not to anger Richard. In the letter, she expressed her love for Amelia and expressed her hope that one day they could reconcile. Although she didn't mention Ethan, her tone was loud and understanding. Amelia was heartbroken when she received the letter. It wasn't the reconciliation she wanted, but it was a start. She wrote back immediately, expressing her feelings in a letter. She told her mother about her life on the farm, the hardships she and Ethan had faced, and how happy they were despite it all. He didn't hide his feelings, hoping that his honesty would heal the differences between them. As the letters continued, Margaret began to see her daughter in a new light. She realized that Amelia had found what money could buy, a life filled with purpose, love, and truth. In the morning, her vision began to change. But Margaret knew that it would be difficult to change Richard's mind. Little did they know that a family crisis was imminent, one that would force them to confront their differences and come together. It was a quiet morning on the farm when the first signs of trouble began. As Amelia and Ethan tended the fields, discussing plans for the upcoming planting season, Amelia's phone rang. She didn't use her phone much these days, preferring the simplicity of farm life, but when she saw her mother's name on the screen, her heart skipped a beat. Margaret rarely called, preferring to communicate by letter. Something about this phone was very strong. Amelia answered quickly, her voice filled with concern. Mom? Is everything okay? There was a long pause on the other end before Margaret spoke. There was fear in her voice. Amelia, I don't know who else to call. Your father is in trouble. Amelia felt a chill inside. What do you think? What's going on? Margaret explained that Richard's company was facing serious problems. A poor investment strategy and a major lawsuit had led to the downfall of the Stanton Empire. For the first time in decades, the family's financial future is uncertain. Richard, always proud and confident, insists on keeping the company. But what really worries Margaret is the effect the stress is having on her health. He always works hard, never accepts help or admits weakness. Margaret was afraid she would break under the pressure. Amelia's mind raced. Her father was a proud man, and she realized it was hard for Margaret to call him. She looked at Ethan, who was listening quietly. He seemed calm but worried. Without hesitation, she nodded, telling him softly that they would get through this together. Mom, Amelia said softly, we're coming. Tell me what you want. Margaret's voice was relaxed, but there was still hesitation in her voice. Are you sure, Amelia? Your father isn't ready to see you. He hasn't forgiven you for leaving. Amelia felt pain in her heart when she heard her mother's words, but she put the pain on aside. I know, but it's not about me. This is about helping the family. We'll find a way. 44 later that night, as Amelia and Ethan packed their bags, he couldn't help but feel angry. It had been many months since he had last seen his father, and the thought of seeing him again filled him with sadness and grief. Ethan sensed her discomfort and gently placed his hands on her shoulders. 44, you did the right thing, he said. How you went out, you showed them what kind of person you are. That takes strength. Amelia nodded, thanking him for his support. He knew that having Ethan around would make a big difference. The magnificent palace, with its tall pillars and neatly laid lawns, contrasts sharply with the beautiful farm. As Amelia walked through the front door, she couldn't help but feel a tinge of nostalgia. This had been his home for many years, but now it felt strange and cold. Margaret embraced them, hugged her daughter, and her eyes filled with tears. I'm so glad you're here, she whispered. He turned to Ethan and smiled at him. Thank you for coming. Ethan nodded respectfully. We're happy to help. 44. Richard, however, was less popular. His expression turned serious when he saw Amelia and Ethan standing in the hall. He looked older than Amelia remembered, his face full of stress and fatigue. But he was proud and made no effort to hide his anger. "What are you doing here?" he asked loudly. "I didn't ask you for help." Amelia took a deep breath and saw her father. "I know you don't, but we're here. Mom told me what happened and we want to help you. Whether you like it or not, we are a family." Richard gritted his teeth but said nothing. Margaret came in, her voice soft but firm. "Richard, we need you. Now please let's put the past aside." Although Richard was reluctant, he agreed to let them stay. In the next few days, Amelia and Ethan worked hard to support their family. Amelia uses her business knowledge to analyze the company's situation, find ways to reduce costs and negotiate. Although Ethan disagrees with the corporate world, he offers new ideas and practical solutions. His calm demeanor and problem-solving style impresses Richard, even though he refuses to accept it. As Richard and Ethan work together, the tension between them slowly begins to ease. Sometimes Richard would find Ethan chatting with Margaret in a soft voice, giving her words of encouragement or helping her with something small. Richard clearly had no personal agenda. He was a decent man who genuinely cared about Amelia and her family. One evening, as the family gathered in the living room to review progress, Richard finally spoke directly to Ethan. "You're not what I thought you were," he said with a sigh. I thought you'd be like everyone else. They are trying to take advantage of us," he said. Ethan saw Richard looking at him and his words were slurred. "I'm not here to take anything from you, Mr. Stanton. I'm here because I love Amelia. And because she loves you, even though you can't see her now." Richard looked away, his expression conflicted. For the first time, she no longer sees Ethan as a stranger, but as someone who has earned his place in the family. It's not easy for someone like Richard to understand, but it's a start. As the days pass, the family begins to rebuild, both their business and their relationship. Amelia's efforts to save the company pay off, and she earns her father's respect. Margaret also finds herself growing closer to Ethan, admiring his kindness and humility. Yet, the barriers between them slowly begin to crumble. But this journey isn't over yet. There are still wounds to heal, trust to rebuild, and lessons to learn. But as these families face the challenges ahead, they realize that the true wealth isn't money or power, but the bonds that bind them together. Richard Stanton was a man who had built his life on leadership. He controlled his business, his appearance, and even his family's future. But now, as he watched his daughter and wife work tirelessly to save the company he had spent his life building, he began to feel something he hadn't felt in years: humility. It wasn't easy for Richard to admit he needed help, let alone admit it to someone like Ethan, who represented everything he had rejected as unworthy. One evening, long after the rest of the house had gone to sleep, Richard sat alone in his study. A room with bookshelves full of business and management books used to be a sanctuary. But tonight he feels like he's in prison. His eyes wander to the framed photo on his desk, a photo of a young Amelia, smiling, standing next to him on a company trip. His joy was contagious and his smile unwavering. They reminded him of a time when their relationship had been simple, before ambition had caused conflict between them. For the first time, Richard wondered if he had made a mistake. He had always believed that winning was the greatest gift he could give his family, but now he wasn't so sure. Amelia had found joy in life, which he dismissed as meaningless and worthless. And Ethan, a man once considered a threat, had shown more loyalty and honesty than any of Richard's trusted assistants for years. The next morning, Richard joined Amelia and Ethan in the kitchen preparing breakfast. It was a rare opportunity to get up close, and Richard could see that the onlookers were filled with interest and wonder. Ethan was talking about a new project on the farm, and Amelia listened intently, her face beaming as she explained her plans. There was a sincerity between them, a genuine partnership that Richard couldn't help but notice. Richard said, "I never thought I'd see Amelia this happy," Richard sighed. Amelia opened her eyes, surprised by her father's voice. It wasn't the sharp, commanding voice he was used to. there was a gentleness and sensitivity in it that surprised him. Then she replied, "I'm glad, Ray. But it's not just about Ethan. Because I feel like I'm in charge of my own life." Richard bowed slightly, considering his tone. "I always thought I was doing what was best for you. I thought I was protecting you." "I know," Amelia said. "And I appreciate everything you've done for me, but sometimes the best way to protect someone is to let them find their own way." Richard didn't answer right away, but his words stayed with him. He realized that he was holding on too tightly, afraid that he would lose control. But he sent his daughter away. For the first time, he began to forgive. As the weeks passed, the couple continued to rebuild, not just their business, but their relationship. Margaret volunteered to bridge the gap between Richard and Ethan. He often invited Ethan to tea with him, using the time to learn more about his life and character. He was impressed by Ethan's humility and the quiet confidence he displayed. Little by little, he began to see what Amelia had seen all along. One afternoon, Margaret offered Richard an idea. "Why don't you go to the farm? Look at Amelia's life. I think it will help you understand her better." Entering Ethan's world made her feel uneasy, even scared. But Margaret's gentle persistence got the better of him, and a few days later he found himself standing in the middle of the Carter farm, feeling out of place. Ethan greeted him warmly as he offered his hand, which Richard hesitated to take. But over time, Richard began to see the farm in a different light. He watched Ethan work carefully and meticulously, taking pride in tending to the crops and animals. He watched Amelia walk across the farm, gaining confidence and joy with every step. Clearly, this is not just a farm, it is a home, a place built on love and hard work. By the end of the trip, Richard has begun to change. For the first time, she sees Ethan not as a threat, but as a man with whom her daughter has a real and meaningful connection. It was not the life Richard had in mind, but it was a life worth respecting. A few weeks later, while the family was having dinner, Richard was doing well. Richard, who is always at parties, surprised everyone by standing up and raising his glass. His voice, though calm, was full of familiar emotion. "I'm wrong," began to meet Amelia briefly. "I've held onto my pride for so long and almost lost my daughter in the process, but seeing the life you've built, Amelia, it made me realize that success is not about wealth or power. It's about the people we love and the things we love." Amelia felt a lump in her throat as she listened to her father's words. It was the closest thing to an apple, and it meant more to him than he could say. Richard turned to Ethan, who looked very serious but sincere. "Lee son, I misunderstood you. I thought you were no good for my daughter, but I was wrong. You showed me what it means to be a real man, and I'm proud to have you in this family." Ethan was deeply moved, but remained humble. "Thank you, Stanton. It means a lot." As the family clinked and cooked, a sense of togetherness emerged that hadn't been seen in many years. Understanding. Amelia and Ethan's stories remind us that love has the power to transform even the hardest hearts. This book teaches us that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the strength of our relationships and the values we hold dear. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe and click the notification bell for more news exciting. Don't miss it. This is Lord Ethan Stories, where every story brings lessons about life, love, and patience.